What's up, Guardians? I'm Profane, thanks for checking out the video. As we continue to explore the best builds in Destiny, we turn our attention towards optimal damage, and in today's video we'll be checking out the best DPS loadouts that you should be using here in Edge of Fate. We'll touch base on the best exotic armor and overall builds to use, but our main focus is pinpointing the best weapons and the best weapon rotations that will give you an edge when it comes to optimal damage output. Before we get started, if you do end up enjoying the video and find it helpful, then please be sure to hit that like button below, along with the subscribe button if you're new. Both are greatly appreciated. I'd also really appreciate it if you could give me a vote for the Face of Halloween competition. This year I decided to enter myself and the murder car into this Halloween themed fundraiser, because this event promotes something that means a great deal to me. This is an annual contest that's sponsored by the Starlight Children's Foundation. Thanks to organizations like this, hospitals don't have to be such a scary experience for children. Daily voting is free, of course, but if you decide to, you are welcome to cast extra votes and donate towards the Starlight Children's Foundation, and all proceeds will go towards delivering fun and happiness to children who find themselves and their families hospitalized. With that said, let's talk about optimal damage. The first place we start is basic enhancements. Before you can even take into account the efficiency of any weapon, you have to set yourself up for success, and that starts with your choice in armor and armor mods. By devoting 200 points into your weapon stat, you'll give your primary and special weapons a 15% increase in damage against boss level enemies, along with a 10% increase for heavy weapons. And once that stat is beyond 100 points, you'll receive a 10% increase to the reload speed of any weapon. So building up your weapon stat will play a pivotal role towards optimal damage. And depending on what build you're running, you might need to focus into super, melee, or grenades. That way you'll have better uptime and more damage output for those abilities. You might find yourself using font mods to improve those stats, but I would not recommend using weapon fonts to improve the weapon stat, because you'll receive a greater damage bonus out of equipping weapon surges. It's safe to assume that you and your team would have a well of radiance for damage, so you're already getting the benefits of a 25% increase in all outgoing damage, and with weapon surges equipped, you could give yourself another 22% bonus in weapon damage. You might be running recuperation mods for survivability, but when it comes to damage phases, you'll want to wear 3 surge mods to maximize your damage. With the help of the Elemental Overdrive artifact mod, you do have the potential to reach 25% bonus weapon damage, as this grants the equivalent of a ×1 weapon surge, and that's going to happen whenever collecting an elemental pickup, and that's going to stack along with your equipped weapon surges. Weapon surges rely on armor charges, which are fueled by orbs of power, so to maintain those charges, you might want to consider using time dilation, which extends the duration of armor charges. You'll get orbs as teammates cast their supers, but the attrition orbs weapon perk could also be a great complement, as this would create orbs on sustained damage. The only problem is that those orbs will be generated at the feet of your enemy, so if you're not close enough to pick them up, then there's just no point. The best weapons for damage are typically the ones that don't require reloading, which has made traits like rewind rounds such an amazing option to have on weapons like Outbreak Perfected and Mint Retrograde. But at some point you're going to have to reload something, and that's where you'll need the advantage of loader mods. This provides as much as an 18-point increase to your reload speed whenever wearing 3 mods, which would stack alongside the bonus reload speed that you get from your weapon stat. It's only a step down to 15 points when using 2, so that might be a better option if you're trying to use font mods. Dexterity mods could also be beneficial. If you're in a situation where you don't have to worry about manually reloading, then this mod would be a great option to reduce the time it takes to swap between weapons. Most dungeon and raid bosses have pretty large crit spots, so you shouldn't have too much difficulty getting precision shots, but if you are struggling to have consistency, then I would recommend using targeting mods and possibly even anti-flinch mods, but those are going to be situational and based on the boss that you're dealing with. Well of Radiance is the most common form of damage buffs, but the Lumina exotic hand cannon does offer a slight advantage, as it provides a 35% bonus in damage, but that's only going to last for 11 seconds, and you can only hold a max of 6 noble rounds, which is where the Boots of the Assembler could take things a step further, as this Warlock exotic would continuously create noble seekers, which would provide that same 35% bonus damage whenever you're standing inside of a well or empowering rift. Titans do have a bubble to use whenever on the Void subclass, which does grant a 25% bonus in weapon damage, but there's very few scenarios where this would be a better option than Well of Radiance. There's also Sentinel Shield, which would provide a 40% bonus in damage, but that's only getting provided to teammates whenever shooting through your barricade, and in that process the team would miss out on all the damage that you could have dealt, which just makes Well of Radiance the better all-around option. To maximize any damage scenario, you need a proper debuff, and that's where Tether, Tractor Cannon, and Divinity come into play. Tether and Tractor Cannon provide a 30% debuff, increasing the damage from any source for a total of 8 seconds. Tractor Cannon is much more limited to close range engagements, so you're typically going to need to rely on a hunter with Tether. But if you're facing a boss who has a very small crit spot or a boss that moves around a lot, then the Divinity could be a much better option, as it would turn everyone's shots into precision damage. We do have other forms of weakening like the Fellwinter's Helm and Buried Bloodline, and lesser weakening effects like Snare Traps and Weakening Grenades, which would be great against lower ranking enemies, champions, and even mini-bosses, but these are less ideal options when going up against raid and dungeon bosses. We'll talk more about damage perks here soon, but weapons that offer utility traits like Demolitionist and Grave Robber can become extremely useful towards optimizing your damage. These traits reload your weapons when activating your grenade or your melee. So if you're using a melee or grenade-centric build, or if you're on Prismatic and have Transcendency available, then these are going to be great perks to amplify your overall damage output. But you do need to follow a more specific gameplay loop to really be able to maximize the use of these traits, which means you can't afford to waste your grenade and melee abilities. And that's where traits like Rewind Rounds or Envious Arsenal could really come in handy. Envious Arsenal aligns perfectly with Bait and Switch, so as you use all 3 of your weapons, you're automatically reloading, and the more weapons that have this trait, the better. But the problem with this trait is that when you're out of ammo, you're not getting the benefits of Envious Arsenal or Bait and Switch. So in more extensive encounters, it might be something that you have to take into account, meaning that you're going to need to find ways to generate ammo or use a different perk. We'll talk about exotic weapons and overall rotations here in a bit, but when it comes to legendary weapons, Elemental Honing gets a lot of mixed reviews, but a lot of that comes down to the type of weapon that it's featured on and what type of build that you're using with it. Elemental Honing is much like Bait and Switch, but instead of having to deal damage with each weapon, it's about dealing elemental damage overall. The more types of elements, the more damage this trait deals, and it does include kinetic damage, and unlike Bait and Switch, which has a maximum duration of 11 seconds and a maximum bonus of 30% damage, Elemental Honing can stay active for 23 seconds, and it provides a maximum of 35% bonus damage, 40% with kinetic weapons. This trait works best when used on Prismatic, where you can easily apply different types of elemental damage, which makes this a great option to use on weapons that have Demolitionist and Grave Robber, because you can easily rotate through your abilities along with your weapons. One of the most impressive weapons that I've seen so far with this trait is the Opaque Hourglass, which doesn't get nearly the amount of credit that it deserves. A lot of that has to do with the synergy that's created alongside Temporal Blast, which we'll talk about here soon. But with Elemental Honing equipped, this crossbow hits like a Clydesdale on crack. And since it can drop with Sympathetic Arsenal, you'll be able to automatically reload your other weapons whenever reloading this one. Bait and Switch and Elemental Honing aren't the only standout damage perks that you have the option of. Surrounded can make an incredible option that provides as much as a 47% bonus in damage, depending on what weapon you're using, but you have to have at least 3 enemies within 15 meters. Precision Instrument is also a great option on precision framed weapons, like the Agape Hand Cannon or the Shoreline Descendant Sniper, and this provides a stacking bonus that maxes out at 30% on sustained precision damage. Explosive Light can be a great trait to have on grenade launchers and rocket launchers. This provides increased impact and explosive damage, and that'll be extended over 7 shots whenever at maximum stacks of light. The problem with this is that if you're not able to collect more orbs, you're not going to be able to maintain the damage bonus beyond the initial 7 shots. This becomes much more of a problem with grenade launchers than it does rocket launchers, which is why the Win and Wear is such a strong option right now, and it performs exceptionally well with a Mask of Bakris and the Hazardous Propulsion. There's a few archetypes that really do well with target lock, like the Retrofit Escapade with 4th times the charm, but unless you have a way to continuously feed extra ammo into your magazine, there's very few weapons that can really benefit off of this perk. There's also origin traits that can optimize our damage output, like Vice Stinger, which periodically refills a portion of the magazine, or Tenacity, which builds up as much as a 10% bonus in damage, and you could go straight into a damage phase with that. If you find yourself in a scenario where swords, rocket launchers, and snipers are being used, then you'll need to be sure to take advantage of the bonuses provided by the Gjallarhorn, Ergo and DARCI. DARCI provides a 15% increase to the damage of legendary snipers that are used by your teammates, while the Gjallarhorn and Ergo will provide Wolfpack rounds to legendary swords and rockets, which will be a great way to optimize everybody's damage. Temporal Blast is a new volatile weapon mod, and there's absolutely no reason to not be using this on any newer generation weapon. This mod builds up an explosive charge as you deal damage. You're going to have to deal around 900 points of damage to fully charge the explosive shot, and with slower firing weapons dealing more damage per instance, you could see yourself charging Temporal Blast with one shot and then getting the detonation on the very next, and each temporal explosion is going to deal 351 points of base damage, which does get scaled, so this will work out really well with the mid retrograde, the opaque hourglass, and the win and wear, but since it's a free source of damage, you should be running it on all of the newer weapons. The last form of damage enhancements that I want to talk about is area denial grenade launchers. If you include the Wither Horde, we now have a total of 5 of these available. We have the Lost Signal, Velocity Baton, Psycho Pump, and Festival Flight. All of these have traits that will auto-reload in some fashion, and because these weapons apply continuous damage, they'll be able to pair up really well into most any loadout, especially those that are utilizing bait and switch. Now that we've talked about all the basic damage enhancers, let's talk about a few class-specific ones. Hellion Buddies, Stasis Turrets, and Arc Souls are a great source of free damage for Warlocks, and depending on what build you're using, you could have a few of these up at once, which could add a great deal of extra damage. Storm's Keep has become an extremely powerful option for Arc Titans, especially those running the Cuirass or Crest of Alpha Lupi. This will build up stacks of bolt charges on sustained weapon damage, and each bolt charge will release a total of 675 points of base damage, and that's a benefit that gets shared with any nearby teammate. So for optimal damage, it's going to be just as important to have a Titan running Storm's Keep as it is to have a Well of Radiance. Hunters have quite a few advantages when it comes to maximum damage output. Not only do they get damage boosting exotics like Celestial Nighthawk, Foe Tracers, Mask of Bakris, and Star Eaters, but they get the benefits of Marksman Dodge, which automatically reloads all of your weapons, and that can be an invaluable benefit when you're in the middle of a damage phase. We mentioned earlier that the best weapons for damage are those that don't have to be reloaded, but when you have Marksman Dodge, you're not going to need to rely on traits like Envious Arsenal, auto-reloading, or reconstruction. There's quite a few exotics that focus around the use of dodges, like the Mask of Bakris, which would give you a stacking bonus in arc and stasis weapon damage, and that bonus now stacks alongside weapon surges. There's also the Speedloader Slacks, which are an extremely underrated option right now. This grants bonus dodge energy when applying sustained damage, allowing you to perform consecutive dodges, and as you're reaping those benefits, your teammates will enjoy as much as a 55-point increase to their reload speed. Exotics like Celestial and Star Eaters are renowned for their superior damage output, but this exotic flips the paradigm, and it lets us maximize on the potential of our weapons, and it's going to go great with any of those area denial grenade launchers that we mentioned earlier. Marksman Dodge isn't the only option to automatically reload our weapons though. When on the Strain subclass, you have the Thread of Ascent Fragment, which reloads your equipped weapon whenever you activate your grenade. And that can be exploited heavily whenever using grapple grenades, as you'll recharge your grapple whenever connecting to an anchor, which is something you could easily create with a navigator. Echo of Domineering is available whenever using a Void subclass, and this reloads your equipped weapon whenever suppressing an enemy. And when using Stasis, you have Whisper of Impetus, which will reload all of your weapons when dealing damage with a powered melee. The Facet of Command is an option when using Prismatic, and this will reload your weapons when freezing or suppressing an enemy. So even if you're not a hunter, you still have a few options to reduce how often you need to reload. There's a few other elemental fragments that could provide a lot of extra damage benefits, depending on what build you're using. If you're on a solar build, then Ember of Char and Ember of Ashes will be a necessity, as they will increase the amount of Scorch that gets applied to enemies, which will set off more ignitions, and those ignitions will now spread Scorch. So as soon as a boss level enemy ignites, they're already getting Scorch reapplied. This combination will improve the performance of any solar weapon that applies its own Scorch, including exotics like the Dragon's Breath, Thousand Voices, and Lord of Wolves. The new Burning Ambition weapon perk works remarkably well with this fragment combo, as you'll apply stacks of Scorch on sustained damage. This would not be a damage perk that I would use on a heavy or special weapon, because it's not going to do anywhere near the amount of damage that other damage perks would, but on a primary weapon like the Yeartide Apex, it would be a great option, especially if you're on a build like Caliban's, Dawn Chorus, or Starfire. The Facet of Ruin Prismatic Fragment would increase the damage dealt when stasis crystals and frozen enemies shatter, which is the same benefit that you get out of the Whisper of Fissure's stasis fragment. So these fragments would help increase your damage potential whenever using stasis weapons like Salvation's Grip, Conditional Finality, Aegir's Scepter, or a legendary weapon like the Lionfish with Chill Clip. Facet of Courage is a prismatic fragment that's seen a few changes recently. This now provides a 10% bonus to light-based grenade and super damage whenever used against enemies who are debuffed by strand or stasis effects, and this provides a 50% bonus for powered melee. So this fragment would be great for increased ability damage, but it's not going to improve elemental effects created by weapons, so keep that in mind when running weapons that have traits like Jolting Feedback, Burning Ambition, or Incandescent. And with that said, we're going to take a more in-depth look into the specific weapons and rotations that you'll need to incorporate to deal the most damage. And we start with a group that I like to refer to as the Show Stealers. These are the weapons that will take over the majority of your damage phase and include exotics like the Thunderlord, the Outbreak Perfected, Grand Overture, Exdaris, Whisper of the Worm, and Touch of Malice. What makes these weapons so incredibly beneficial is their ability to apply continuous damage, along with the amount of super energy that you'll gain while using them. With our new armor system, it's a lot easier to regenerate your super, but these weapons are able to maximize on that on a much higher level. Our next options used to be classified as Show Stealers, but due to ammo limitations, they've been forced into more standard rotations, and this includes the Lord of Wolves and the Choir of One. And in more close-range encounters, you could include the Fourth Horseman in this group. These exotics dish out a ton of damage, but you'll dump all of your ammo in a matter of seconds. And since these weapons use special ammo, you'll have to mix in a rotation of abilities and other weapons to maximize your damage, which will see these exotics pairing up really well with legendary weapons like the Outrageous Fortune with Bait and Switch, the Win and Wear with Explosive Light, or the Apex Hourglass with Elemental Honing. And you'd have a great deal of success when using these loadouts with builds that revolve around the Foe Tracers, Mask of Bakris, Starfire Protocol, or Sanguine Alchemy. Our next group of exotic options are much more catered to complete weapon rotations. The Dragon's Breath, Finality's Augur, Wither Horde, and Anarchy will feed right into the use of Bait and Switch and Elemental Honing, as all of these exotics apply sustained damage over an extended duration. And in the case of Finality's Augur, you're getting the added benefit of Bait and Switch. You could also include the Izanagi's Burden and Parasite into this group. These options don't deal sustained damage, but they do inflict a ton of burst damage. And in the case of the Parasite, it can even increase the damage of your other weapons. This group of exotics allows you to easily rotate through weapons like the Mint Retrograde, Lance Ephemeral, the Festival Flight, Returned Memory, or even the Finite Maybe. And it'll be a lot easier to rotate through those weapons when they have perks like Demolitionist or Envious Arsenal to automatically reload their magazine. There's a few niche loadouts that can really make a difference right now during damage phases, and that includes builds that revolve around the Peacekeepers and the Lucky Pants. The Peacekeepers are able to excel right now because they provide bonus damage to SMGs on sustained fire, and they automatically reload stowed SMGs, and that works out really well with the Borrow Dyad, but it requires you to use double SMGs in this loadout, and since you'd have to continuously fire both SMGs to get the full benefit, you wouldn't be able to deal very much damage from your heavy weapons. The Lucky Pants has a bit of an advantage in that regard. To fully maximize on this exotic's potential, you would want to run double hand cannons. A combination of the Malfeasance or Thorn and Agape could really do well right now. And since hunters can make use of marksman dodge, you can quickly reload your weapons, allowing you to easily rotate in your heavy weapons with options like Win and Wear, Outrageous Fortune, and Opaque Hourglass being some of the best options. And with that, we've covered just about all the different variations and options that you have to deal the most weapon damage here in Edge of Fate. If there's anything that we've left out or anything that you feel that is worth mentioning, then please be sure to point those out in the comments below. If you need any further help getting your build set up, then be sure to check out my list of builds on my Mobalytics page, which I'll leave a link for down below. Thank you as always for checking out today's video. If you enjoyed and found it helpful, then please be sure to hit that like button below, along with the subscribe button if you're new. Both are greatly appreciated, and both really do help support the channel, and so does being a member. So a big shout out and thank you to all of our current channel members. And until next time, Guardians, this has been Profane, wishing you all some happy hunting.